Okay, remember, we are always looking for leaders to try and help be part of the solutions that we are searching for. So it's great to see that they are prioritizing youth to enable them and allow them to be the leaders of tomorrow. Okay, next up, this is very exciting. We have an exciting session with the United Nations Secretary General Envoy on Youth, Ms. Jayatma Wickramanayake, who is chairing the next part of today's agenda in the SDG7 Roundtable. In this roundtable, we're bringing together young climate activists and young energy activists to discuss how youth can feed into the UN high-level dialogue on energy in September and the UN Climate Change Conference, also known as COP26 in November, to ensure we sustain the moment from this summit towards achieving SDG 7 and also SDG 13, which calls for climate action. I would like now to welcome to the SEforALL Youth Summit, Ms. Wickramanayake.
Hello, Nelufer. Very nice to see you again. I hope you're doing well, and all of those who are watching us online as well, and those who are participating. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you are well, you are safe, you're taking care of your physical and mental health during these very challenging times. My name is Jayatma Wickramanayake, as Nelufer said, and I am the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. My job is to bring the United Nations closer to young people and bring young people closer to the UN. So I'm very excited to join you today as the chair of this SDG7 Youth Roundtable in this Youth Summit, and very excited to let you know that this is the place to be if you are passionate about solving the biggest challenges of our time, including access to clean energy and transition to renewable energies that will have a huge impact, not just on our climate, but on all our lives and our planet as a whole. The voices of young people, your voices that you are sharing here today is an integral part that can lead our efforts to achieve SDG 7 and help the world to meet the climate ambition outlined in the Paris Agreement. So as the chair of today's roundtable, I will be moderating two very important discussions that we will be having along with our panelists. For the first roundtable, we will be discussing the high-level dialogue on energy, and we will be discussing energy dialogue in the context of COP26 for the second round. We have an amazing line of speakers and panelists that I will introduce in just a little bit, but I hope in addition to following today's discussion closely, you will also be sharing your thoughts, your ideas, your recommendations, your frustrations even, and your questions through the chat box on here and on social media. With that, I want to hand the floor over back to our Master of Ceremony, Nelufer, to share a little bit more information on how you can use the different tools and functions available on this platform to engage in the dialogue, not just to listen.
Thank you. As ever, you are gracious and kind, but also forthcoming. One thing I know about Ms. Jayatma is that she is not afraid to hear the truth. So get involved, and this is how you can do so. During today's live session, we will be able to use the live chat function to the right of your screen and participate in our SDG7 poll. Now, when the poll opens, a small window will pop up directing you to the poll and its multiple choice answers. We encourage you wholeheartedly to take part in today's polls. Get involved and have your voice heard. That's so important. And we will be getting some questions today from the live audience as well. So write your questions on the chat box on the right side of your screen and have everyone at the round table hear you and address your concerns. So is everyone ready? I hope so, because we're about to start the SDG7 roundtable. Over to you, Ms. Wickramanayake.
Thank you very much, Nelufer. Now, before we start our first discussion on the high-level dialogue on energy, allow me to welcome and introduce our panelists today. First, we have Kanika Chawla. Kanika is the Program Manager for UN Energy from SEforALL. We also have Benjamin Strzelecki, the Global Focal Point SDG7 Youth Constituency, and Evelyn Adder, Focal Point for Energy Access of the Strategic Youth Network for Development. Welcome all three of you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us today. To kickstart our discussion, I'd like to first invite Kanika to take the floor and share a brief presentation on the upcoming UN High-Level Dialogue on Energy. I hope that you will pay attention and listen to this presentation, because that will give us a lot of ideas and tips about the different ways that young people can get involved in the high-level dialogue. Over to you, Kanika.
Thank you, Jayatma, and what an exciting privilege to be here with all of you today. I'm going to walk you through what the high-level dialogue process is going to be, and then I'd be very happy to kind of take your questions in the way that both Jayatma and Nilofer explained earlier on. So I'm just going to pull up my screen and give you a little insight into what is being planned for the high-level dialogue on energy, which is going to be held alongside the 76th session of the UN General Assembly in this upcoming September. And to just understand how momentous this high-level dialogue is, I think it's important to bear in mind that this is the first such dialogue in the last 40 years. The last one happened in 1981 in the wake of the oil crisis. And the energy world has come a long way since then. And yet, as I'm sure you've been discussing for these past 2.5 days, not far enough. And so the idea of this dialogue, which is a General Assembly mandated summit level dialogue that will be hosted by the UN Secretary General in September, is to really bring all the different communities of all the different invested parties come together to really enhance their ambition towards realizing SDG7. The idea is, of course, around, how do we realize SDG7 by 2030, but also for all of us to come together to discuss the importance of energy as this golden thread that helps advance also other SDGs and strengthen the political commitment to the realization of the SDGs overall and in specific SDG7. This has all become increasingly important also as countries around the world and business communities and basically all of us really look to recover from COVID-19 and the different ways in which it has affected us, and all of which are yet to even be discovered, because we continue to be responding still. But once we're done responding to COVID-19, we will be recovering from it, and energy will play an important role in that. That's where finance and new technologies and investment, and we're just going to see a new paradigm, and this high-level dialogue marks kind of the beginning of that process, and that's also why it's so important that all the communities come together for this. The idea of the high-level dialogue is also to be very forward-looking. It's not just about the actual dialogue that happens in September, but also how does that become a really important building block for this decade of action that we're embarking upon. And so this is going to happen. There's going to be kind of two pillars on which this forward-looking aspect of the dialogue is going to be built. One is going to be on these action plans and a global statement that will be put out at this high-level dialogue, which will be around how this is, the first milestone of this decade of action towards realizing the SDGs. But the second one will be energy compacts, which is a really ingenious way for member states and businesses, as well as for youth communities and civil society organizations, to all make their commitments towards the SDGs for 2030, and recognize that each of us has a role to play, and to then put that role, lay it down in the form of an energy compact that can be monitored. The high-level dialogue is being organized across 5 themes. So 3 of them are, things that you will not be surprised to find, which is energy access, energy transition, and enabling SDGs through inclusive and just energy transitions. But there's also cross-cutting themes that are very deeply interlinked, and they're enablers in making sure that these ambitions are realized, and they cut across the 3 thematic areas, which is around innovation, technology, and data, and finance and investment. And as the youth understands this better than anybody, innovation isn't just in technology, but also innovation in data, innovation in financial models, innovation in business models, innovation in outreach and communications. And all of this will then feed into the energy compacts that different countries and parties and companies will come up with as well. The process is also multi-layered, and this slightly complex slide actually shows you all the different parts of the machinery, so to speak, that are working behind the scenes. So there is the role of governments, which are the global theme champions right at the top, and that role is very advocacy focused. Then there is the role of these technical working groups, which include UN agencies, UN energy partners and agencies that are going to be co-leads, and then groups of members, which are really, multi-stakeholder representatives from around the world, from across communities, that are going to, lend their voice, that are experts in these specific areas. And these members also include youth groups and members of the youth. And then finally, there is a high-level non-state group of experts called the advisory group that kind of, ties everything together, makes sure there's coherence between the different processes, and also advises the Secretary General and the other high-level dignitaries on the path forward. I also want to talk a little bit about energy compacts, because this is really an important area of additionality. And the energy compacts are voluntary commitments, and they're supposed to be seen as kind of an important way for all the different stakeholder communities that are listed on your screen to really express themselves in terms of their actions on energy. As many of you will know, and I'm sure it'll be discussed in the second half of this discussion around the nationally determined contributions that countries have expressed to the UNFCCC as part of their climate change actions, which talk a lot about what countries are going to do on climate action. And while energy is an important part of climate action, energy also has deep interlinkages with other SDGs and with development priorities that are far beyond climate as well. And so the energy compacts offer an opportunity for all the different stakeholders to kind of express themselves on what it is that they are going to do to contribute towards the realization of SDG7. I have this slide here, which I'd be happy for all of you to, as Nilofer said, a lot of this material will be made available to you, but it is just to say that this process is very much in line with all the other existing processes. It isn't to really, increase the burden, so to speak, on the parties that are going to sign up to this process, but it is actually to help them streamline their own ambition as well as their commitment, and then also receive support through the UN Energy Platform to realize this commitment. And so it very much kind of echoes the ongoing other commitments that countries are making, as well as companies and civil society organizations. But it is also, there is an additionality or a gap that it fills, because it's kind of facilitating support for realizing these ambitions and targets. And finally, and this is really important, the high-level dialogue is perhaps an important and first marker in getting us started on this critical decade of action, but it is by no means the last. It is really just the beginning of a 10-year journey and an uphill journey, because there's a lot of ground to cover, but there is also a lot of enthusiasm that this Youth Summit is actually a testament to for action. And so we have a long ride to go together, but I'm sure that it's going to be a rewarding one to 2030, where we realize the SDGs, and then onwards to 2050, where we have the net zero commitment that has been already laid out. So with that, I'll stop now, and I'd be very happy to have questions.
Thank you very much, Kanika, for that very comprehensive presentation. Now, before I go to Benjamin and Evelyn, I want to open our first poll. So if our technical teams can help us get the poll online. The first question we have for you is, how would you like youth to be involved in the UN high-level dialogue on energy? And there are multiple choices for you to pick from in the poll. Some of the answers we have are more youth participation in the preparatory process, youth speaker on the main stage event, youth delegates made part of each country's delegation to the high-level dialogue, separate youth events on the sidelines of the high-level dialogue. So multiple choices here. Personally, I think all of this is important and we need to have young people be part of all parts of the process at every step in the most meaningful way. But I'm very interested to see what our audience thinks. And as young people, what do you think are the most impactful ways for you to get involved? So please keep those answers coming our way. Please get engaged in the poll. And we will be discussing results of the poll and your answers in just a little bit. Until those answers keep coming, I would like to come to Benjamin and Evelyn for their interventions. Benjamin, as the global focal point on SDG7 of the Youth Constituency, I would like you to share your thoughts and perspectives on the support that is needed for young people to effectively and meaningfully participate in the high-level dialogue on energy, and what you plan to bring to the high-level dialogue and energy as the SDG7 Youth Constituency as well. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Jayatma, for the floor. I'm speaking on behalf of the SDG7 Youth Constituency, and my intervention reflects contributions from almost 100 youth climate and energy organizations, companies, and other groups. The overarching message is clear. We, the young people, constitute the majority of the global population, and we are a driving force behind the implementation of sustainable energy in our local communities. Hence, we must have a seat at the decision-making table. There are three key pillars for meaningful engagement in the dialogue that emerge from the consultation that our constituency held in preparation for this roundtable. Firstly, young people want to directly engage in the dialogue. For this, the process needs to be inclusive and accessible to all, including underrepresented and vulnerable groups. In particular, communities suffering from energy poverty and impacted by pollution from the energy sector must be consulted and engaged. Some of the actions enhancing accessibility include translation, explainer sessions about the dialogue, and financial and logistical support for engaging in the event. Secondly, youth need proper representation in all components of the dialogue, including the high-level segments, energy compacts, side events, and written inputs. Through their self-organized networks, young people and other civil society groups need to be able to deliver their collective views and demands for more ambitious action. Thirdly, the dialogue must be a two-way action-oriented conversation. Too often, summits and forums conclude with general statements and centralized suggestions. We need a better approach to deliver on the SDGs. The dialogue should give global visibility and recognition to the life-changing projects that young people are executing in their communities right now. Then, as a follow-up, the outcomes of the dialogue must be streamlined to the local, national, and regional levels through multi-stakeholder partnerships that on equal footing involve youth. For those already in the energy movement, we need more mentoring, networking, and funding. Additionally, through education, finance, and professional training, we need to bring all people on board with the clean energy transition. Time to act is now. All the three pillars, inclusive participation, fair representation, and action, must be co-created and implemented with young people, and we hope that SEforALL will become a key partner in this process. As a constituency, we look forward to further engagement in the dialogue, and we invite all young professionals to join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, for your very precise and very direct input to the process. And you spoke about these three pillars: inclusive participation, fair representation, and especially of those who are the most marginalized and vulnerable communities, and the importance of the dialogue to be a two-way process. So not just top-down, but also based on the foundation of what the communities are already doing for survival and for the improvement of their day-to-day lives. Kanika, any immediate reflections and thoughts on Benjamin's presentation?
Well, first, I wish I was such a bright and engaged youth when I was younger. That is my first reaction and response to that. But also, I think that, these are all really important points. These are points that are very much a part of the consideration in the planning. And just at this point of also being inclusive of the most vulnerable communities is something that is a very important priority of the SRSG, who is also the high-level champion of the dialogue, Damilola Ogunbi, and she very much, endorses and holds the same views. So, I can just, I will definitely take all of this back to the organizing group, but I also can kind of assure you that these are things that are already well under consideration. And so we will definitely make sure that it's all very much becomes a part of the fabric of this high-level dialogue.
Thank you, Kanika, for your commitment. So I think we now have the results of our first poll, and we have your perspectives on what are the most impactful ways that you think young people should be engaged. So it's very clear we have a winner for young people to be involved in the country delegation to the high-level dialogue. And then, of course, more youth participation in the preparatory process. I think Benjamin also spoke about this, how young people need to be able to shape the event itself, shape the dialogue itself, and how the accessibility of information, the process needs to be transparent, that stakeholders can be part of it. And this is very well reflected in your inputs as well. And very, very... I'm actually very interested to see the focus on being a part of government delegation, because in most of these dialogues, we see often youth representing civil society being sort of out of the room and doing their advocacy outside of the room, finding it difficult to access the negotiation rooms or the actual decision-making rooms. So more advocacy and more efforts to increase the number of young people coming through national delegations to the high-level dialogue. This is very clear. So let me, with this result, go to Evelyn. Evelyn, you're the focal point for energy access in the Strategic Youth Network for Development. What is your thought on this? How do you think, what do you think are the different ways that young people get involved in the energy dialogue? And what are some of the barriers, challenges you see, and what are some of the opportunities as well?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm very happy to be here. I'm the focal point for the Strategic Youth Network for Development, an organization in Ghana that promotes energy access and the inclusion of young people to the decision-making at the national level. We also have a network of young people at the local level that we are building their capacity so that they can become active participants in the decision-making processes in Ghana. So I'll first take a look at some of the opportunities available for young people. And I think that with SDG7, the clean energy industry and clean cooking present an opportunity for young people to create and innovate for employment opportunities, to create employment opportunities for themselves at the local level. And Ghana has the Renewable Energy Master Plan that also wants to encourages a lot of young people to come up with innovations, and they have some funds available to support young people. And so this is a clear opportunity for young people to actually create employment opportunities for themselves. Now, with some of the things that the challenges that young people at the community level face. One, they have problem accessing information, and information is always, especially I'm using Ghana as an example, information is always stuck at the national level, and young people at the community level don't even understand what SDGs are, the SDG7, the importance of it, and how they can get involved. So if our government can create avenues where young people get access to information, it will be great. And then I think capacity building is also needed. Young people have a lot of fantastic ideas in Ghana, and a lot of them are doing their best, especially when it comes to the manufacturing of the clean cook stoves. But then there is also need for technical support for these young people to improve upon the innovations that they are coming up with. And then another support that young people will need is the access to finance. And when you come up with an innovative idea and you develop your model and everything, and you don't have the financial capacity to actually produce the innovation and take it to the market, it doesn't really help. And so mostly when grant opportunities are given, you see that young people at the community level are not even aware of it. So if there is going to be an opportunity, there's the need for us to make sure that access to finance is made available to young people at the community level so that they can also showcase their innovations. And there is also the need to create platforms where young people who have these innovations can have access to market. How do they showcase the product that they come up with? Because at the end of the day, I see that SDG7 has the potential of becoming a huge employment opportunity for young people, especially at the global south. But with the lack of access to finance, the lack of capacity to even, first of all, understand and then be able to innovate. And even if those who are able to understand, when they innovate, how do they get their products to the consumer? And once the capacity of young people are built, they will also become influencers who can influence their households to adopt clean cooking. They can methods. They can influence their households to shift from fossil fuel to purchasing renewable energy products to power their homes. And so these 4 key steps, I think, are very important. Access to information, access to finance, access to market. It's very important for young people in order for us all to achieve the SDG7. Thank you so much for the opportunity once again. And I'm here for your questions if you need any questions from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Let me, with that reminder from Evelyn as well, remind all of our viewers that you can ask questions from Kanika, Benjamin, and Evelyn. So keep your questions coming in the chat box, in the social media live streams as well. Let me quickly go to Kanika for her reflections on Evelyn's response. I think Evelyn touched upon a very crucial issue, one on empowerment in terms of the lack of access to knowledge, to finances, and to platforms that are enabling for young people to innovate and find solutions. And the second one was, I think, more on the opportunities that are there at a very high level in terms of energy transition, the green jobs and the new job opportunities even that are there, but are often not connected to the conversations that are happening in silos on climate change and energy. So Kanika, any reflections?
Yeah, thank you, Jayatma, and thank you, Evelyn, for, I think that the points that, Evelyn, you've raised are really, I think, where they're the critical kind of connections that often high-level conversations miss out on. And that is really the focus of this high-level dialogue, is for it to be really quite inclusive, for it to recognize that the energy transition in different parts of the world is going to look different, that everyone is not going to have the same trajectory, and that it cannot be done by governments alone. While governments will continue to play a really important role, it is about fostering partnerships and really enabling the community at large. And for that, there need to be, sensitization programs, Evelyn, like the ones that you were mentioning. There needs to be everything that is happening today needs to be streamlined and all work together in tandem with each other. And I really think that the big point, or like the big value of this high-level dialogue, is also to raise awareness around SDG7, and the energy compacts are that continuing kind of like the hymn to which we all must dance. Because we're all going to say, this is what I'm going to do as the youth, this is what I'm going to do as a company, this is what I'm going to do as a non-profit organization, this is what I'm going to do as the government. And then how does this all fit together? And even when it fits together, it may not be adequate to realize the 2030 ambition. So then with the support that will be received, and when we all work together, we can improve our energy compacts. They're all living documents. So we can all say, okay, well, I had said I would do this, but I'm now in a position, by working together, I'm able to do more. And I think that this also goes to Benjamin's point earlier, is it's not enough to just have a seat at the table on the day, but how do you really build something together in the coming decade? And I think that the energy compacts are actually a very nice way to kind of build continuity and keep the momentum going from the September dialogue onwards till the end of this decade.
Thank you very much, Kanika. Now let me go to some of the questions we have received. The first question is for Benjamin and Evelyn. Both of you, there's one question. Do you think youth can effect change best from the outside or inside at the table of power? And how can they, and there's another question from Lucia who asks, how can they join your youth organizations? Benjamin, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think that's an excellent question, and it very much links to the points about advocacy as to how best we as young people can influence how things get changed. And I think the responses to the poll, which indicated that most of the young people hope to have youth delegates in the national representation, very much relates to that, because while global fora like high-level dialogue are critical for galvanizing ambition and exchanging best practices, the policies and the goals are really set on national level. So I do believe that we need to have young people at the table at those global convenings, but it is perhaps even more important that we have continuous engagement on local and national level so that we can pressure our governments to increase their ambitions right when the goals are made from within, working with the governments, with the cities and other relevant stakeholders. So I would say both, definitely. And of course, there is a separate aspect beyond advocacy of what young people are doing. And there is definitely a lot of potential. We see so many young entrepreneurs and researchers really driving forward what we can do about sustainable energy in our communities. And to briefly answer as to how they can join the SDG7 Youth Constituency, we have universal model of membership, and we invite all of young people, both individuals and organizations, to join us. I believe that more information will be shared from the organizers if there is an option to somehow display that. But otherwise, you can go to unmgcy.org, and in the upper right corner, you will see a button, Join Us. So register there and make sure to indicate sustainable energy as your area of interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. Evelyn?
Thank you for your question. I think that young people can make change both at the table, from both inside and outside, because young people need to be at the table to actually influence the decision-making processes, to influence what kind of policies that our government will come up with. And once those policies are made, we also need young people to take up those policies and actually be part of the implementation processes of the policy. So it's both ways. There's no way that if we are not at the table when decisions are being made, decisions that will be made for us may not be what we want as young people. But when we are at the table and we contribute to the decision-making processes, we can own whatever policy that comes up with. The youth themselves will become ambassadors, and they will even bring more young people to it, and so that they can help with the implementation. If you want to, on your second question about how you can become a member of SYND, we are based in Ghana, but if you want to read or have more information about us, you can go to our website, www.syndghana.org, and you have all our information. We are also the RCO, the Regional Coordinating Organization for Access, and so if you want to join Access, when you go to our website, you have more information and then join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. The last question is for Kanika, and I have a friend named Anika, so I always mispronounce your name. Kanika, the question for you, I will read it a little bit, and I would like you to answer the question, and at the end of the question also wrap up maybe in one sentence. What is your key takeaway from this very engaging and important conversation this morning? So the question is, how can young people contribute in the high-level dialogue? It seems very technical. Where do I start?
That's a really good question. And actually it is to answer that question that that this entire session has been hosted and that I'm here. So I really do hope that I'm able to give you a very specific answer that you can action. So there's 3 levels at which the youth can engage with the high-level dialogue. One is through, as I had mentioned in my presentation, there are 5 themes. Each theme has a technical working group that is led by a UN Energy Partner Agency, and it has about 30 members, which represent several various communities, including the youth. So each of these already has a youth member. If you look at on the UN Energy website, all these lists are available. If you feel that the youth has been underrepresented and you would like to get involved, please do write to us. That information is also available there. The second level, and perhaps into my mind, the most impactful level, is this energy compacts. Is for youth organizations to submit energy compacts, to lay out their own vision for the energy transition, and also detail out what actions they can take. And these actions can be anything. They can be, including actions that are around effective communications, running advocacy campaigns, as long as you're able to detail that out and you can submit that as a energy compact. And then we would work with you over the coming months, but also years, to kind of, how do we build on this? How do we make it, how do you connect you to the other people or the other parties that are submitting energy compacts, and how can this all become a large movement? And the third one is the one that I think the viewers responding to the poll identified, is through their governments, right? And coming as part of the member state kind of contingent and influencing conversation, while the high-level dialogue is not a negotiation. It is a dialogue. There's going to be discussions. But even so, there will be quite a lot of, there will be this forward-looking statement. There will be quite a lot of space to contribute to that and to really build ambition. And finally, and then this is kind of my wrap-up as well, is we're trying to make this high-level dialogue as inclusive and as representative as possible. So there's always space for support, for feedback. So please, use the UN Energy Twitter handles or the website. And, there's a bunch of ways, but to really get engaged. And I may not have all the answers for you today, but if you will pose questions, I assure you that we will circle back and find answers and get back to you. So thank you for your interest in the high-level dialogue. It's a very important and momentous occasion. And thank you, Jayatma, for this outstanding session. And I hope that I've been able to provide you some answers.
Thank you very much, Kanika. Benjamin, I've seen that you put a comment about how you are organizing some of these consultations that will feed into the high-level dialogue. Why don't you also share that with our audience so they have a very concrete way of contributing?
Yeah, thank you. So as Kanika mentioned, there are technical working groups and there are already youth representatives there. Many of them are associated with the SDG7 Youth Constituency. We actually have youth representatives in all of the working groups, and we will be organizing consultations to collect inputs from youth experts to make sure that they feed into the working groups. So we also invite you to join us for those consultations, and we will be able to give you this opportunity to join the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. So that wraps up our session 1 of the high-level dialogue, which we will be also continuing to a second session about the COP in just a bit. But I wanted to quickly summarize some of the key points that were raised. I think it was made very clear that young people need to be involved in the preparatory process in the summit itself and its follow-up. In leading up to September and beyond. And Kanika, Benjamin and Evelyn has highlighted different ways that you could get involved in this process. There's no one way, there are multiple ways, and there are different levels at which you can provide this input and shape the agenda as well. The second most important thing was the need for not only creating spaces, but empowering young people to take up those spaces, right? There's no point of opening a door and say, come and take a seat if the young people are not funded, if they are not empowered with the information, or if they're not provided a conducive space. So we discussed the importance of providing those resources and tools that young people need in order to be able to effectively participate as well. So there are many opportunities going forward, and I really encourage all of you, those who are watching us, to get engaged with UN Energy, with the youth organizations who are speaking to you today, and the many more who are working on this issue as well, because only if we unite our voices and demands, we can make a huge impact in these important decisions that will affect all our futures. Thank you very much, Kanika, Benjamin, and Evelyn, for this enriching discussion. And I am now going to invite our next panelists for the next conversation. The second round of our roundtable is also a very important and very relevant topic, the global energy discussion in the context of COP26. We all know that this year is a make or break year for climate action, and we cannot afford to miss our climate targets and ambitions to ensure that we can minimize the irreversible impacts of climate crisis. And energy, especially just and fair transition to renewable energy, is absolutely necessary if we want to achieve this climate ambition. Now, young people, as all of us have seen, have been advocating relentlessly for climate action through the climate movements that they have been leading at the local, regional, and global levels. Their influence in driving the discourse on transition to clean energy is undeniable. So with that, we want to make sure that these voices and these movements and these demands are reflected in the UN climate negotiations. So let me invite Anum Ahmed, the head of youth engagement of COP26, to kick off this discussion with a brief presentation of what COP26 is and what plans Anum and her team and her government as hosts of the UN climate negotiations have in engaging young people meaningfully in these conversations. Anum, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jayatma. That was brilliantly said. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here. It's a pleasure. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to the SEforALL organizing team for running a brilliant youth summit. It's really been fantastic. I guess I can dive straight into the presentation. Enrica, are you able to pull them up on the screen if they're not already on there? I'm assuming they are already up.
I still cannot see them, so maybe we'll give a second.
That's okay, no worries. I guess it's worth just saying that we have a very close working relationship with SEforALL, in particular with Damilola. Damilola very kindly is the co-chair of our Energy Transition Council that's chaired with Alok Sharma, the COP President Designate. And Damilola is also on the Friends of COP group, which is chaired by the COP President Designate. So it's really fantastic to actually be able to continue working closely, particularly in the context of this youth summit.
That's really great. So it looks like you already have a lot of sort of cross-fertilization of ideas and processes that will merge at some point in September and actually the fourth quarter of the year, because all of this will happen as a culmination of those different processes. All right, we can see the slides now.
Perfect. Thank you. And absolutely, Jayatma. So as Jayatma said, I'm the head of the youth engagement team here in the UK's COP26 unit. I work with my team member, Rebecca Thurston, and we are very passionate about making sure that we're amplifying the voices of young people in the run-up to Italy's Youth for Climate event, but also COP26 in November in Glasgow. So Enrica, if we can go to the next slide, please. I wanted to very quickly just address what are the core aims of COP26. So number one, COP26, we need to unite. We need to unite the world on a path to a zero carbon economy as we build back greener from COVID-19. We all know that we are at a turning point, both for our planet and our health. And in November in Glasgow, we need to show that this shift is the growth story of the future and then accelerating, and it's irreversible. And finally, our path to a zero carbon economy has to be fair and inclusive and create the global resilience we need to combat climate change. And I think the key point here is that COP President Designate Alok Sharma has committed to making this the most inclusive COP ever. And young people are an integral part of that. So just as Jayatma said, we need to make sure that young people are on this journey with us. And we recognize that they're calling for urgent action. So what are we as the UK presidency doing to work collaboratively with young people? So here on the slide, I'm just going to talk you through some of those actions. The first thing is that we've dedicated and established a youth engagement team in the COP26 unit, and that's myself and Rebecca, as I mentioned, and we're coordinating the UK government's strategy to ensure that youth voices are heard in COP26, but also in its legacy, right? The second thing is that COP President-designate Alok Sharma has also publicly committed to meeting with civil society and youth in every country that he visits. And last week was an excellent example of that when he went to Ethiopia and launched a young Ethiopian influencers network. He's currently in Nigeria and again will be meeting with inspiring youth climate leaders. We've also established a COP26 Civil Society and Youth Advisory Council, and this council is chaired both by Alok Sharma and a youth member. And the council comprises of young climate leaders, NGOs, Indigenous people, and faith groups, and we'll be meeting with them regularly in the run-up to November to make sure that the council can help form the plans. We're also working in partnership with the Italian government, who, as you know, are hosting the pre-COP and the Youth for Climate event in September. And I'll talk actually in the next slide about how you guys can get involved in that. And then finally, we're endorsing Youngo's Conference of Youth event, COI16, which will be happening in late October. Enrica, next slide, please. Thank you. So we've talked about it just before in the earlier session. How can you guys get involved in COP26? So there's a number of ways that you can do that. Number one, a key objective is that we want to raise the profile of the excellent grassroots initiatives that young people are leading. So join our social media channels and please showcase what you're doing. We want to hear your story. The second thing is, at the moment, there's an expression of interest that's live until the 5th of March for organizations and individuals to apply to have an exhibition space or to do a cultural performance in the UK government managed spaces in the blue and green zone. And you can find all the information on the process on the COP26 website. And it would be really brilliant to see fantastic youth work in those spaces. And just on the last 2 points that I mentioned about Italy's events. So at the moment, the application window for youth delegates to apply for the Youth for Climate event in September in Milan is open. That's until the 1st of March. And all the information is actually on Jayatma's UN Youth Envoy website. We are looking for 400 youth delegates, 2 young people from each UN member state. This is going to be a historic event. It's really important that we have a good geographical representation of young people that are going to be talking about key topical climate change issues. So please do put in an application for that. And just finally, there's also an expression of interest window that's live until the 15th of June for the pre-COP event and the Youth for Climate event if you're looking to host a side event. So that gives you a really good package of the ways that you can get involved. And I think one I missed from this list, which is around the fact that we have every 6 weeks an open stakeholder meeting where civil society and youth can attend and hear about our plans, learn about ways that they can get involved for them to raise the profile of their initiatives. And I know that Mame and the team have created a Facebook group and there's a Google link in there. So if you'd like to share your contact details, we can then add you to the meeting invites. I think that's the end of my presentation. Just thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to hearing your input to the poll and your questions. Over to you, Jayatma.
Thank you very much, Anum. Thank you for that very comprehensive update and also very clearly letting us know how young people can get involved in the process leading up to COP26, at the COP26 and after as well. Thank you for the shout out on Youth for Climate as well. And as Anum said, please head over to our social channels, Youth Envoy website. You will find the application link where you can apply until 1st of March to be in Milan for the pre-COP youth event, which we call the Youth for Climate event. With that, I think we are ready now for our second poll. So I'm asking our technical team to help us with launching our second poll, which is going to be the question of what role can young people play in advancing the global transition to clean energy? So what role can you play in advancing the goal of global transition to clean energy? You'll see some options on the poll. 1, lobby governments to phase out fossil fuel power and scale up clean power. 2, educate yourself and others about the socioeconomic benefits of clean power transition. 3, switch to renewable power at home and buying from green companies. And 4 is push for renewable energy to be used in your schools, colleges, and places of work. Now, if you ask me, I will probably go for the all of the above option. I'm not sure if we have that in the poll, but keep your answers coming and we are going to discuss them in just a little bit. So while we'll wait for those answers, let me invite one of my favorite people, Nisreen El-Saim. Nisreen is the chair of the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change. She's a fearless advocate for climate action, and she does not shy away from speaking truth to power. And Nisreen, I've seen how in the past few months you work so hard with your colleagues in the Youth Advisory Group to do global consultations, to find the very concrete recommendations that came from young people in these consultations, how we can take some bold action to translate what is in the Paris Agreement and beyond into concrete action. Please share with us, what were your key findings? What do you think that Anum, her colleagues, us at the UN, and those who are watching us should prioritize when it comes to young people's engagement in this conversation?
Thank you very much, Jayatma. I feel so happy to know that I'm one of your favorite people. I think I will be smiling until tomorrow. I'm very glad to hear Anum's and the COP26 team plans to include young people. Indeed, the general atmosphere within the UN system is changing into more young blood, which is showing that the world is really changing in our favor. Thank God. I think we can use these opportunities and to also use the challenges that we're facing into advocating more for not only youth engagement, but actually youth leading the process. I'm very happy and glad to see the hashtag youth lead, because we're actually leading a lot of processes in our life, and it's time to lead it also within the COP system. I already recommended to have a youth champion, because COP26 has many champions, yet we don't yet see a youth champion for the COP. Well, I think next year the COP will be hosted in an African country, and Africa as a continent has more than 60% of population under the age of 35. So if not this COP, then we will be advocating for the next COP to have a youth champion. One of the major things that I felt it during during the consultations, that we need to learn to say no, actually, because sometimes we accept things that doesn't go up or go higher to our inspiration and our demands and our key responsibilities in saving the planet and so on. So learning to say no is something that would help us even in the negotiation rooms, in the bilateral discussions, and so on. Well, I think it's most important also to not to treat young people as a checkbox, because I've been seeing this a lot during my journey as a youth advocate, and also during my journey as the chair of the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group, that sometimes we get invited to events and to speak in panels and so on, where the other speakers get 30 minutes and I get 3 minutes only, or where I don't really feel that I'm represented, or my absence or my presence there is really appreciated. It's very important also to treat young people as professionals. We studied a lot in the university, we have very high degrees, we have very high qualifications, and I think we deserve to be treated in a professional way. I think this is very much it from my side.
Thank you very much, Nisreen. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. I think you highlight some key important things, that even though we see some progress when it comes to the inclusion of young people, still that is not happening at the level or the scale or the meaningfulness that we need. And sort of your recommendation for a youth champion for COP26, the consultations, that the findings that you had, that often young people are used as a checkbox or a tokenistic exercise, and you spoke about the importance of sort of that dignity, respecting that agency, and giving the dignity to young people. Because I've heard this many times, where sometimes when I go to summits as well, and some leaders say, oh, whenever I need an energizer, I go to the youth summit, as if it's, the youth summit is some kind of a zoo or an entertainment show where you go and enjoy and then come back with the energy. And I think what you're really saying is, we don't want to be treated that way. We want to be treated as experts and not just like add-on to make the process beautiful. And I'm pretty sure that Anum and the COP26 team are very aware of this and are trying to do things the most meaningful way. Anum, any reflections, any things that you are doing particularly on these areas to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past?
Thank you, Jayatma, and thank you, Nisreen. I think you are so right to open this conversation and say it, because tokenistic engagement is not right. And I think our intention, our ambition is to make sure that we're having meaningful engagement. And I wanted to mention some youth members on the Civil Society and Youth Advisory Council who, are helping us shape ideas and who are on the grassroots, in touch with their communities. So we've got Elizabeth Wathuti, who you guys will all know, who's a climate leader in Kenya. We've got Ridhima Pandey from India, Bella Lack in the UK. We've got India Riley from who's an Indigenous representative from Australia, and Ariana Khan. So all of them bring such rich and nuanced perspectives in the council meeting, which CPD really relishes, because he wants to hear from young people that are in touch with their local communities. So I think that's one way where we're actively eliciting input from young people. But I've had the opportunity, I've only joined the unit in late November, but had the opportunity to meet with so many inspiring young people and to say, okay, let me hear what you're doing. How can we support you? How can we connect you, make your project go global? So we're doing everything that we can, but we are very open to hearing feedback on how we can do better. So thank you, Nisreen, for stating those points.
Thank you, Nisreen. I will come back to you, but I want to quickly share the results of our poll. So looks like we have some very strong answers coming in on educating yourself and others about the socioeconomic benefits of clean power transition. I think this speaks very much to what Evelyn mentioned in the previous session as well, that those who understand the processes do advocate and lobby in these platforms, but often the community is most impacted by these issues, often lack that access or the education that is needed to bridge their lived experience into negotiations or high-level dialogues or conversations that we are having. And that does not mean that they're not experiencing it. It's just that there are no ways for us to connect that experience with the dialogues like these. And lobbying governments to phase out fossil fuel power and scale up clean power, switching to renewable power at home and buying from green companies, push for renewable energy to be used in your schools, colleges, and places of work. I think all of this are things that all of us can do in our personal capacity, through our youth organizations, through the movements that we are all a part of. But definitely, I would say, putting the responsibility back on governments is something that is very strongly we need to advocate for, because at the end of the day, they are responsible for the implementation of these plans, and we shouldn't let those decision makers put the responsibility back to people to say, well, you change you change your recycling or you change your light bulb and that is going to fix the problem. We know that it is a bigger problem than that, and we definitely need national policy level commitments to phase out fossil fuel and transition into renewable energies. Let me, with these results, go to Vishal. Vishal Prasad is a Pacific Island student. He's fighting climate change through his youth organization. And I would love to hear Vishal's thoughts also on the poll, but generally his comments as well on how youth organizations can get involved in these conversations, and what is it that you bring to these conversations, as particularly from the Pacific Islands, living the reality of the impacts of climate change every single day, even though you did not contribute to the problem in the first place. Over to you, Vishal.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jayatma, for this opportunity. And I agree with that point on educating and lobbying governments. I think that's wonderful, and that's what the Pacific has been doing. It's just raising awareness on the plight of what climate change and the reality of what climate change is doing in the Pacific. And so with that, I'd like to say a very good afternoon and very good morning to everyone. My name is Vishal. I'm a campaigner based in Fiji for the Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change, and we're a youth-led NGO that is campaigning to seek an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on the issues of climate change and human rights. For us, COP26 is an absolutely vital forum. We all know it's time for states to take stock of their NDCs and to review and update them, and it is equally vital that youth are involved in this. And more broadly, to be involved in the climate movement, particularly at the local level. But we know that, and we believe that youth involvement, as mentioned before by the speakers before me, saying that it should be foremost and first genuine, authentic, and meaningful. It must be intentional. Youth activism in all regards has grown exponentially globally with a variety of campaigns, programs, and perspectives, all working together to address the very imminent threat of the climate crisis. And these groups must be supported. The common inhibitors that have remained are a lack of skill and capability, lack of resources, and poor prioritization or show of support by local authorities. This worsens especially in developing countries like the Pacific, where because of constrained resourcing and limited skill and expertise among the youth involvement gets least prioritized or ends up as what has been mentioned as token participation. Many times these concerns linger because of a lack of confidence in youth, often because of the perceived spur-of-the-moment style of activism that youth movements are labeled as. This gives rise to a corollary issue of the lack of capacity building to ensure meaningful involvement. Getting through the door is one challenge for us, but equally significant is the challenge of effectively contributing once you are through the door. And youth involvement would greatly benefit if there was adequate capacity building opportunities. However, we've been looking at involvement in very general terms so far, and there are a myriad of considerations that need to be taken into account because the environment surrounding youth involvement are different from country to country. Culture, traditions, education levels, formal, informal structures of society, etc. are all important matters that must be looked into when discussing youth involvement. There is no one-size-fits-all solution here. As such, strategies to support youth involvement must be carefully tailor-made to each locality, to each country, to account for the differences, and the local institutions and structures in those countries must rise up for this. Also, the social media angle is equally important. Youth involvement in climate change in the climate movement has shifted significantly online, and this has accelerated since the global pandemic. Because this becomes the most easily accessible platform for youths across the globe, proper mechanisms and avenues must be in place to ensure that youth participation in these platforms is properly harnessed and translated into something meaningful in the more formal climate decision-making space. This harnessing and translation needs to happen at all levels because this becomes most pertinent by governments in the local level. And so in the current COVID-19 pandemic, which poses a series of challenges that further compound all of the above considerations, they remain vital in ensuring genuine and meaningful youth involvement. A contextualized approach and an embrace of the more informal avenues that youth use and translating that into a formal space are two key ways we think youth involvement can be supported globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vishal. You raised a lot of important points. I think one very important thing that really stuck in my mind was how we need to tailor the engagement of young people to also suit the local contexts and the realities that they live in. And secondly, this mismatch between the ways that institutions usually see organizations and movements versus how young people organize themselves, because that evolves so fast. I remember this one incident where for a UN meeting, the UN reached out to a particular youth movement to say, can you nominate 2 leaders from your movement to participate in this dialogue? And the movement wrote back a letter saying that our movement does not have leaders. We are all equal. The UN was not at that point able to understand how these young people organize themselves. And that is very different to the traditional way of, having a leader and the regional focal points and country focal points. That's not just the way that they organize themselves anymore. And that is the reality of this particular youth organization, which is not the reality of many other youth organizations. So I very much resonate with you on those points. And I think that is an important point to keep in mind as well when we talk about the high-level dialogue on energy or the COP26 and these many intergovernmental international processes we're talking about. Before coming to Anum for some quick reflections on those thoughts, I want to go back to Nisreen to see if she has something else to contribute in this context of the conversation in the direction we are going.
Thank you very much, and I hope you hear me better now than earlier. So basically, the main issues we are having or facing right now is built on the same spirit that the first climate change convention was built on, which is inequalities and historical responsibility. We are now facing the same issues because regarding the historical responsibility, us as a young generation, we're not responsible for the current situation of climate change, but we will be the most impacted by climate change. But we will be the most impacted by climate change effects and impacts. I guess it's very hard for us as a young generation to find the right place for us if we do not talk about the actual based rights or rights-based interventions that we are talking about. So we have the right to development, because now we are in the Sustainable Energy for All Summit, and I'm sitting in a room with more than 35 degrees Celsius, and we don't have electricity here in the capital of Sudan. While in other places, like for example New York City use in 1 month what the whole Sudan is using for 1 year. And if we compare the population of New York, for example, if we compare the population of Sudan, and if we compare that only 40% of the Sudanese people have access to electricity, access to electricity doesn't mean it's sustainable, and it doesn't mean also it's like reliable energy. So we have a lot of cuts, we have a huge gap between the supply and the demand, and so on. And it's happening everywhere, not only in Sudan. One of the main issues that we are talking about earlier in how to include young people, with also noting the differences and the inequalities that a lot of people can have in their countries. For example, I got a good education. I can have access to semi-good electricity and internet, also semi-good. But what about the other young people in the grassroots communities that doesn't have access to electricity nor to an internet connection? How the COP and how all of the other UN processes can actually reach to these people and hear their voices and actually touch their basic issues and basic concerns. I think it's very much depending on us, the privileged people who have the seat on the table already, who have different privileges of education, access to electricity, and access to internet, to actually deliver their voices. Not only that, but to give them a place in the future and to solve their problem. I've been into many discussions regarding politics, regarding energy access, regarding climate change, and regarding science. And by the way, today is the Women in Science Day. So I salute every young women in the field of STEAM, and as a physicist, I know how hard it is to have a co-mate, female co-mate in the science field. So we have a lot of responsibility. It's not easy, and I'm not sure that I'm actually sure that the battle we're actually fighting is not going to end. It's not going to end soon. But we have to keep trying, and we have to try to be more focused. I'm sorry I had to close my video. I hope you're hearing me well or better right now. If not, I will open my video because I like to see my face. Okay, good. Yeah, so reflecting what others feel, think, suffer, and giving them not only solution, but also giving them the space to project their own solutions is one of the key aspects for this COP to be a success. But not only this COP, but all of the youth engagement that we are thinking about. For example, yesterday in our meeting with Secretary General Antonio Guterres, I was talking to him about the brief they had with Patricia Espinosa about having all of the pre-sessions online, highlighting the differences and the issues that we might face if we really had to deal with that only in an online way. And I told them that maybe I don't have the answer, maybe the team doesn't have the answer, but I'm sure that someone around the world have the answer. So why not we reach everything? It's not a shame to request help from others, because if we had 10 minds thinking about one thing, it's by far better than to have one mind thinking about this one thing. So for me, Nisreen, it's my email is open, my Facebook, my Twitter at Nisreen Al-Saim is open. If you have any idea that will prevent us from harming others with COVID-19 and also having proper meeting and proper negotiation for COP26, please reach me out, and I will make sure that your voice will reach up. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nisreen, for your thoughts, but also on that offer that you made to those young people who are watching us right now. I have a question coming from Michael, aimed at Anum, asking, do we need to be physically present in Glasgow and Italy to be part of the Youth COP26 and the UK COP in Glasgow? And are the youth tickets funded to Italy?
Thank you, Nisreen and Vishal, Jayatma, and Michael. The tickets to attend Italy's Youth for Climate event are fully funded. And all the information can be found. There's like a whole pack of information that you can find on the UN Youth Envoy's website on how you can get involved if you're not able to physically come. And I completely acknowledge that there are barriers to participation to physically be here or in Milan. And I think this is why we're saying that this is a kind of an online campaign and movement, right? So we can actively be involved through social media. So if there is an initiative that you want to raise the profile of, get in touch with us through our social channels, and you can be part of this journey with us. I hope that answers your question, Michael, and it's completely pertinent.
Thank you, Anam. And yes, I think you gave a very clear answer. There is a question for Vishal and Nisreen. What do you see as an ideal outcome for youth from COP26? Vishal, I'm going to go to you first.
It's a very interesting question. For youth, in terms of involvement, it would mean not just the physical COP. Actually, ideally for youth, in terms of involvement, it would be great if we have. COP has always been robust in terms of physically being present, but it'd be great to see even a more robust online presence for COP for other youth members who are not fortunate, not able to travel or not able to be physically present. But I guess a more the word I would be looking for is a more pronounced presence for COP online might help, and I think that would be wonderful for youth.
Thank you, Vishal. Nisreen, what would be an ideal outcome for young people from COP26?
Well, an ideal outcome for us, are you asking me as a young person or as a negotiator or as a youth secretary general advisor? So as a negotiator, I think the perfect outcome will be having a clean text and agreement that actually fair, sustainable, and financiable for developing countries in terms of loss and damage, in terms of Article 6, market and non-market mechanisms, in terms of definition of what is climate finance, in terms of how actually to raise the ambition regarding not only to raise the zero, but also to raise to the adaptation and resilience, and actually reaching a point where the finance for adaptation is all equals 50% from the finance to mitigation, which is now only 20% from the climate finance goes to adaptation. And for me, it will be a real success to have world leaders commit that they will dedicate their government, their resources, their policies to actually implement climate change plans and building resilience issues and we don't have time to have more denials for climate change. I think we've been very far from this, yet we still have people who are going backward and taking us backward with them. We don't have time for that. We can't afford any more delay. We already saw the gap emission report by the UNEP. We already saw the 1.5 report by the IPCC. And I think moving forward and flipping this chapter of the climate denial is it's going to be a very great outcome from COP26. The one I really think it's very important for me as a young person to see is more young blood within the national delegations for the negotiations. Unfortunately, we've been in a very hard situation with the COVID-19, where COVID-19 actually took very much dear people, mentors, professors, other elders from us. And I think we will be losing the memory of the negotiation, and we will be losing the track of the thing, and we will be losing the knowledge that people build upon time, because we are not putting new blood in the delegations. Already in the African group of negotiators, for example, in 2020 alone, we lost more than 5 brilliant negotiators. So what will happen next if the coronavirus continued, or even for natural reasons, not only the COVID-19? So having young delegations within the formal delegation is going to be a really good outcome for us. And also, as a negotiator, I know that it's very important to have a physical meeting for the text or for the negotiation itself. The COP and the pre-meetings is not only about having side events or about having presence of the civil society. I know how the civil society can be very much influencing the negotiation, but I also know how technically hard it is to negotiate a text online, and how undermined and marginalized many developing countries become regarding to the technical issues, miss of communication, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisreen. Anu, before going to Vishal for the next question, I want to come to you. I think there are a couple of questions about the pre-COP youth event and the COP, and how can young people get involved in these two different events. I think there's also a little bit confusion that you can perhaps help resolve. And I would also like you to touch upon the inclusion of marginalized communities in these conversations. Over to you, Anu.
Thank you, Nisreen. Thank you, Jayatma. Yes, so lots of activity happening, so I can understand the confusion. So we have in September in Milan, the government of Italy, who are our partners for COP26, they are hosting the pre-COP and the Youth for Climate event. And it's the Youth for Climate event where the application is currently live for 400 youth delegates to attend, 2 young people from each UN member state. You have to be aged between 15 to 29. And if you're younger than that, then we'd welcome a chaperone. It's a 3-day event from the 28th to the 30th of September. And yes, it's a fully funded ticket to come to that event for a young person. And that is separate from the actual COP26 event that's happening in Glasgow in November time. So I hope that clarifies things on that front. But if you've got more questions, then let us know on that. And I think Mame is going to send the web links. I think it would be helpful, Mame, if we can send the COP26 website link for November, and then the link to Jayatma's page for the Youth for Climate event. In terms of, I wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the points that Vishal and Nisreen very rightfully raised about access to and supporting the most marginalized communities who are on the front line. Through our diplomatic network, we're actually currently funding a project run by EcoGen in Malawi. And this project is aiming to train about 100 students and women around using the organic waste recycling production for renewable biogas energy. And this is happening in the Dzaleka refugee camp. So I think it's a really important example when we were talking about the poll and how 37% of you guys said, well, actually, we need to train and upskill ourselves on what this is all about. This is a really powerful example of how EcoGen are doing that in a most challenging environment in a refugee camp. And they're also increasing access to clean energy for cooking food for 4,000 students within that school in the refugee camp. So that's an example I wanted to raise the profile of, because I think it's a really powerful initiative working in a very complex environment with very vulnerable communities. So I think I just wanted to cover that, Jayatma. I will hand over to you now.
Thank you very much, Anum, for those clarifications and ideas. Vishal, there's a specific question for you, asking if there is a group working on energy issues, particular to the SIDS.
Yeah, thank you, Jayatma, for that. What I'm aware of here in the Pacific, we have the Pacific Islands Forum and the Secretariat of the Pacific Community. They have a focus on energy, and they work on energy-related matters, and they have a specific team for that. And I'm sure that they will be, and I can forward more details on that after this, if you would like. But definitely, I think those are the two dominant groups that are in the region that have been working on energy. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Vishal. I think that's about it. Those are all the questions that we've received. Lastly, let me also pass the floor back to Anum for a very quick response on, according to the COP26 presidency, what is it that you will take out of this conversation today? Maybe in one sentence, if you could tell us, what is your commitment going forward from today to bring these conversations into life in the process that you're working on?
That's a great call to action for me. I think the data that's being shared across the 4 points, we will take it away and consider how we can incorporate it in the youth engagement strategy. I think, Vishal, you talked about capacity building, and that's something that we are actively exploring. And I think the evidence from this shows that there is definitely more to do in that front. So that is the takeaway from me. And it was a pleasure being with all 3 of you. And thank you to the SEforALL team for organizing a brilliant event.
Thank you very much, Anum. And I want to wrap up by saying, these topics we're talking about, either it's climate change or sustainable energy, I sometimes feel like people think of them as abstract concepts or ideas, but it's not. It's the reality of people like us who are living in places which are most impacted by these issues right now. I mean, Nisreen is currently joining from Sudan, where she has no electricity, and her internet connection is giving so much trouble for her to even meaningfully express herself on this platform. And I think this is the reality of many young people, not just of Nisreen. And Vishal is talking to us from the Pacific Islands, where they're suffering from the impacts of climate change for many years, and sometimes without the assistance and support that is needed, without those reparations that needs to go to them to actually rebuild and contribute to the development of their countries. I come from a country country that has for years now been the top 10 most affected countries by climate change, and has been really suffering and seeing the suffering of my people from the effects of the actions that we've taken in the past and unfortunately continue to take now and will take in the future if we do not act now. So I hope that this becomes a call to action for governments, for people and supporters and allies like Anum and like Kanika, who are working in organizations that can help us get our voices into these conversations and help us shape those processes. And I hope that today's conversation has left a strong message in all of your minds and in your hearts to integrate this in everyone's work. Just to summarize, I think COVID-19's impact on our collective efforts, either it is the organization of youth movements or these conversations, cannot be dismissed. I think we need to take into account how the pandemic has upended our lives and how it has completely changed some of the ways that we used to engage. And there is a real need there to innovate so that we can give equal access and fair access to everyone to be a part of these conversations. The rights-based approach, young people's agency, their leadership, respecting their expertise and not tokenistic involvement in conversations came up so strongly from all our speakers. The need to not only give young people a seat at the table, but to empower them to be able to take that seat and make an actual difference, bridge their lived experience into those conversations they will make in that table or contribute in that table is also very important. Support for young people, particularly coming from the most marginalized and vulnerable groups, not by their mistake, but because of the circumstances that they have to go through, is a responsibility from all of us as empowered young people and privileged young people, and also those of us who have access to institutions. So I think that call from Nisreen and Vishal to get engaged, from Benjamin and Evelyn, sharing the information about their organizations for you to get engaged. They can be your bridge to these conversations, and please do use those bridges to influence these processes. And then, of course, a call to action for all of us to keep the conversation going. Look for different ways to get involved in your personal capacity, through your school, through your student organization, through your youth organization, through your government. Keep fire under feet of everyone who is responsible to deliver these results for us, because it's our future and we will be the ones who will be living with the impacts of the decisions that are being made today. So thank you very much, everyone, for a wonderful conversation. I hope that you will stay engaged to the last milestone of this conference as well. SEforALL, Mame, her team, Damilola, everyone, thank you for creating this very meaningful platform for us to not just speak among ourselves, but for us to be able to speak to those who are in power and those who are making those decisions as well. Thank you, and we really look forward to being part of this conversation going forward as well.
And that, Jayatma, as you've just shown us, is how it's done. Thank you for your time, for your contribution, for your patience and dedication. I'm very, very grateful to have you. Okay.